Hi everyone, and welcome to Autism Neurodiversity Coaching's Neurodiverse Universe Podcast with myself, Ben Holmes from Autism and Neurodiversity Coaching. Today's guest is Chrissy McDougall, mental health autism trainer. So welcome, Chrissy.
Thank you.
So we'll start with the questions I normally ask all my guests, and then we'll see where it sort of goes from there. Now this one's a bit different because we're going to be talking a little bit about your experiences with your son in terms of just the process in terms of what support he's had, etc. as well. So yeah, the questions will be slightly different to what I normally ask. So the first one is when were you and your son diagnosed as neurodiverse? That's if you have been diagnosed, obviously, which I know we discussed before. So if you want to...
Hi, Ben. Yeah, sorry.
So I just asked you a question and then just interrupted you. So go on, sorry.
Yeah, my son Henry, who's now 20 years old, he was originally diagnosed when he was 3. It was quite a long process. Originally, they did think that he was perhaps might have had a degenerative disorder, and there were lots of hospital tests, and it was a really stressful time because he went through a lot of regression. But he had his diagnosis at 3. I haven't actually had a diagnosis myself at the moment. I'm considering an ADHD diagnosis, and been thinking about it for quite a few years, and probably it's been a bit more apparent over the last year, having done a bit more studying around neurodiversity, and I know we've had some discussions then, and that kind of got me thinking a lot more about it as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. And so if you was to get diagnosed or pursue that, would that mean, what would that mean to you to get that diagnosis, do you think?
I think it'd probably be, I guess it'd help to, for other people to understand what challenges, I guess, there are. Having looked back, I think, over the last few weeks, especially about what some decisions I made in my adolescence and early adulthood, and things like impulsivity, and suddenly just having a bit of a rapid change of professions and not really having a clear path for a long time makes a bit more sense now. But I think it's, at the moment, I'm kind of thinking about how it could help me to get a bit more focused on what might help me and have a bit better direction. But for other people to realise, I guess, a bit more about what ADHD is. And it's a tricky one because I kind of don't know if I need the diagnosis or not. And it's still a decision I'm making as to whether I really feel I need it or whether I can just make some changes myself and talk to friends and family about it, or people I work with. Still an ongoing process on that decision at the moment.
Yeah, no, it makes complete sense. It's it's different to everyone. Some people really want a diagnosis, some don't. Some are unsure and need to figure it out. So there's lots of different ways around it. So in terms of your son, so when he was diagnosed as being autistic, how did that change your life? If it did change in terms of your beliefs and how you view things, etc.
Life was very different at that time. I guess we went from having a baby and a toddler who originally seemed to be progressing quite well, and then suddenly regressed, and quite dramatically, from having quite a lot of words to then reducing words instead of gaining them until he had nothing left, and his skills reduced a lot as well. So there was it was a very worrying time and stressful, thinking that things were a lot more serious, and it was almost a relief when we had the autism diagnosis, but it did change I guess, a lot of the way we did things. So we had to be much better prepared. There was that realization that everything we did, the more prepared we were, the better the day went, the happier Henry was, and the more he understood what was happening as well.
Yeah.
So there were things like we couldn't put his shoes on until we're about to walk out the door, because if we put his shoes on and then we weren't leaving, then it'd cause a meltdown, and then we couldn't even get out the door. And there were certain things that you had to be careful of around him. I had to learn how to really, really watch my own emotions. It's something that Henry seems to really feed off. So if I'm anxious, then he seems to feel it tenfold. And if I'd be looking to kind of ask my younger son not to do something, and what might have been done in a more stern voice had to be done in a very calm, placid voice, and sometimes in silence, to avoid Henry getting massively distressed and lashing out. So I guess it affected all of our behaviour, and has done long term. It's been, in some ways, quite a useful tool how to manage our own emotions as well.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, just that last point, I can imagine the good thing in that sense, that's come from all the challenges you must have had initially. So in terms of yourself, well, the next question is, how did friends or family respond to respond to you finding out you've got ADHD? Well, that depends if you've actually told anyone, is the first bit, I guess.
I've mentioned it to a few people, and some people are quite surprised, I guess, because I can come across as quite calm. And I guess that association of thinking that ADHD for some people is that you've got to be just absolutely all over the place, impossible to sit still. And that's kind of, I guess, there's a lot of assumptions around ADHD that I think people tend to not quite understand what ADHD is in the first place. Some people can understand it and can recognize it after I've mentioned it. So, and I know my younger son, who potentially might be looking at ADHD for himself as a diagnosis, but he's not sure. We're not sure about whether he is or not, and whether to go forward with the diagnosis. But he will recognise traits in me. I will recognise traits in him. And sometimes people close by to me sort of start to pick up on that. But then I find that some people are quite, I guess, want to challenge it a bit more, and try and say, are you sure? And I guess they might challenge that a bit more than other people might do, or just question it. So it's a real mixed reaction that I seem to get.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it's like you say, a lot of people don't know what it is, and they think it's, as you said, the more just the high practice of not being able to sit still, etc. Which obviously it can be, but there's a lot way more to it than that. So yeah, I think it's one of those, people still learning about it, and it will take quite some time before the general population is caught up in knowing what it is, really. So going back to your son again, what support has he received since his diagnosis? Has he received much support at all, in terms of from outside of yourself, whether it's any sort of support package, government, whatever it is there been any sort of support out there in order to help both him and yourself?
Yeah, I mean, we've been pretty lucky over the years. We were, for the first 9 years of his life, we were living in Australia, and we didn't have family living by for a lot of that time. So we didn't have the family support. But as far as care, we had we had Henry in a really good special school. He started out early intervention centre that was brilliant, that had occupational therapy and speech therapy, lots of teachers working with him, and a very supportive environment with the other parents as well. The special school he went after as well was really helpful and supportive, and Henry seemed to thrive. And we've been quite lucky really over here most of the time as well since we moved to the UK. That was back in 2012, and we gradually got some more respite. And because Henry has high needs, he's completely nonverbal. He also has severe learning disabilities and ADHD, and he also has juvenile arthritis and anxiety disorder. So he's got a lot going on, and due to all of those issues and his struggles with a lot of things, he has some really severe, I guess, severely high needs on the sensory side that can make it really difficult to manage and for him to understand danger and risk. So he eventually, after getting more and more support, we realised we couldn't have him living at home anymore for his own safety or for ours, and he moved into a care home at 14, and they were brilliant. He had a really lovely care worker there who was brilliant with him and willing to work and adapt in a lot of ways and learn from me as well. And we had a lot of meetings, and they were very supportive. Henry made a lot of progress there, and he's now in adult care, but he's living in supported accommodation. So he lived in a group home as well, but he's got service for he's got under a few different services, so occupational therapy and speech therapy. He's been under CAMS before quite a lot, and he's got support from social services have been brilliant with him and helping with support packages and helping with other sorts of services like apps that have been funded for him that have helped him. So we tend to find we have to be quite innovative in ways of supporting him. But yeah, he keeps busy, he seems happy, and finally we seem to be moving forward again after we had a couple of years where things didn't go so well for him. But yeah, he's making very good progress. He gets lots of support. I've had a lot of good support over the years as well. So yeah, we're in a pretty good place at the moment with all of that.
No, that's really good to hear. Really good to hear that he's received the support that he needs. That is really good. You know, obviously with you living in Australia before as well. So yeah, that's really good, and hopefully it sort of continues and it can be happy as well. So in terms of both you and your son or sons, you know, whichever you want to talk about. So is there any other conditions or disorders, or however you word it, that you have or you think you may have? So you've already spoke about Henry actually, and saying what he's got. So is there anything else for you that you think I may have that other than ADHD?
For me, over the years, occasionally anxiety has come up, and I guess one long-term condition that I have that I still have to get looked into for the boys as well is to do with connective tissue disorder. So it's a diagnosis I've had that I know I have something, and it's been diagnosed and it's seen lots of specialists, but the actual condition itself, I'm under the 100,000 Genomes Project, which is for rare diseases and disorders. So it's all to do with hypermobility and my connective tissue. There's lots of issues there. So I find I get quite a lot of injuries. I go through periods of time where everything's okay. But I did have a tear in the artery in my neck a few years ago, a vertebral artery dissection. And so that's again something that can be genetic. So looking into that potentially for the future for the boys. But yeah, other than that, mainly for me, ADHD. Henry obviously has lots and lots of different other things going on for him, and my other son seems to have managed to stay healthy and clear, and but also doesn't seem to have any other neurodiverse conditions either.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. So obviously a lot of viewers won't have heard of some of the things you just described there. So yeah. So the next one is, do you see autism or ADHD as a disability?
Yeah, interesting question. For me, I guess in terms of Henry, I would see autism as a disability because he has such high needs and it affects his daily life so much that he struggles to function. And so for him, I would see it as a disability. But I would say for someone who with much higher functioning, I wouldn't see it as a disability. I just see it as a way of thinking differently. Yeah. And experiencing life differently. So for me, I guess it depends on how much it's affecting that person's life, and whether it's more down to whether their struggles are more down to awareness, or whether every aspect of their life is affected and whether they struggle with it. So it's a really tricky one when I knew about this question, because I think it really does depend on the individual. And I wouldn't see it as a clear, definite yes or no. Same with ADHD really as well. But I guess for me, in some ways, I think I'm quite, I'm not too severely affected, that I've managed to adapt a lot of the way I do things and adjust. And it's not affecting my daily life too much. Whereas if it was something that I was really struggling to manage, then maybe I might see it as more of a disability. Yeah,
completely understand that. Completely understand. And it is one of those questions you get a range of different answers, which is why I like to ask it really, because I like to see what everyone thinks with that one. So we've got a few random questions coming up. So first one is, what is your favourite colour, if you have one?
Sort of. I know it sounds a bit of a weird answer, but I would say probably blue would be my favourite colour. It kind of depends on what the colour is for, if that makes sense. So sometimes I'd have a favourite colour maybe that might be different for clothing than it would be for, say, having for the walls in the house, or for if I choose something like a diary or a phone case, then when I look around me, I think, it seems like I've got different tones of blue. And so, probably blue.
Okay, cool. I do understand that with, different purposes for the colours, I guess, like you say, clothing, decorating, etc. So next one is, do you have any special interests at all? And if so, what would they be?
I thought about this one for a bit, and I guess I like keeping busy and doing lots of things, and I love exercise. That's always been a massive interest for me. But then when it comes to completely losing myself in something and getting absorbed in something, then technology. I just love tech. I find that if I've got a new device, or a new phone, or a new tablet or computer, or there's a new app out, that I can suddenly be straight into it and lost for hours and completely lose track of time.
Yeah, good answer. And then the last one is, if you could meet any celebrity, or I would add, anyone sort of famous, past or present, who would that be? And you can pick more than one if you want, and why.
Yeah, this is another interesting one, because for me, I started to think, to go off on a bit of a tangent, to be honest, and think, well, who would I just like to come across in the street and say hello to, and who would I actually want to sit down and have a conversation with, and ask questions and have a good conversation with them and get to know a bit more about the person. And I think if I was actually to want to sit down and have a conversation with someone, I'd love to talk to David Attenborough.
Yeah.
You know, I can't think of anyone who's got more of a, you know, his experience over the years and what he's chosen to do and being out in nature so much. It's just, I guess, so different to daily life for me, and but also just to get to understand him as a person, when you always hear him behind the camera and generally talking about nature and wildlife, and yeah, I guess it was a tough one, because all sorts of different people were going through my head, but and weirdly I did also consider Dame Judi Dench, and I think it was more of that life experience thing again, where just sometimes talking to someone who's got so much life experience, and it's just really interesting.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So a few of things I'm going to ask. So in terms of yourself, in terms of what you do, your training, do you want to just explain a little bit more about what you do with your own training, what that includes? And so I know we've spoke obviously in the past about some of the things you've done. So is there anything you want to talk about particularly in that sense?
Yeah, I guess I keep adding to qualifications, and typical, I guess, of ADHD, tend to take on loads of different projects at the same time, and you know, have got a real interest now in positive psychology, and in the last year have taken on a few different qualifications in that. So incorporating that into the neurodiversity and inclusion training, and currently in the process of designing some new workshops as well. Some for people I've done training for in the past, some that are newer clients. One at the moment is looking at a PTSD workshop, which is a half-day one, and looking more at, you know, grounding techniques and understanding what PTSD is and what triggers are, and how to manage those triggers. But also looking at inclusive recruitment and doing that as a workshop as well, and in the process of designing that. And so generally I've, you know, been delivering mental health awareness and mental health at work training for a few years, and autism awareness training has been over the last few years as well, that I've been delivering that and gradually been developing. And I found through the Positive Psychology Guild, I've really enjoyed doing the courses that I've taken on through positive psychology, and that's helped to give more of a positive spin around autism and neurodiversity, whereas I think in the past a lot of things I've come across tended to be more about how to adapt to accommodate someone who is neurodiverse, whereas now there is more of the shift, as it should be, into looking more about strengths and the positive attributes of neurodiversity, and what positivity that can bring to workplace environments, especially. So I think the workplace can be, I guess, can have their own ideas about neurodiversity, and it's just really nice to have had a lot more focus on the positive side of it, and to see what strengths someone who's not neurodiverse can bring.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like I say, I'm a big advocate of, you know, the strengths based approach side of it. So yeah, that's really good to hear. So obviously we've spoken about, you know, the training you've done, your courses, etc. So just in terms of like other projects you said you've been involved with, is there any, well, whether it's within autism, mental health, or outside that, is there anything you have been involved with or are at the moment?
I guess it's an ongoing process. So I've sort of ended up with some doing some work through organisations I've worked with for a while, and they've just asked me to develop new training for them recently, which is great because obviously the previous training I've done with them for quite a long time has gone down well, and now there's discussions around getting new training happening. And that is focusing, I guess, some of it around the criminal justice sector. And having worked in prisons for quite a few years as well, bringing in that experience is really good to get some more awareness. There's a lot of people in the criminal justice system who especially seem to have an ADHD diagnosis. That one seems to be getting more common, and I guess there's a lot of reasons why that is. But to be able to support people who've got caught up in the criminal justice system and get that support for them to help rehabilitate them, I'm really excited about that, to be able to see if there's some positive changes towards that and help to get, you know, potentially make some changes that with more support, perhaps those people won't keep slipping back into the criminal justice system either.
Yeah, no, that's I do find that really interesting with the prison side of it. You know, a lot of neurodiverse, I think, I forget the percentages, but it's a high percentage of, you know, ADHD autistic individuals who are in that system. And I think a lot of it is misunderstanding as well. You know, obviously some are obviously guilty of what they've done. Some don't realise what they've done is a bad thing, I guess. And then once they're in that system, that's where there's a lot of miscommunication in general, I think, with even like the whole court process as well. I know one thing that a lot of people are lobbying for is advocates to actually be like a go-between between, you know, the individual and the system, to just translate some of the social sort of side of it. Some of the things are being said, and because a lot of autistic individuals, I've said ADHD as well, are black and white thinkers, particularly autism. So yeah, I can imagine how, you know, if you're standing up in court or whatever and you're getting asked questions, how that would be completely different for an autistic individual compared to someone who's not. So yeah, it's interesting you've done that work, sort of the back end of that. Was there any sort of particular challenges you can think of that you had to deal with, and you know how you've had to maybe adapt when supporting those types of individuals?
There's been quite a lot of challenges, I suppose, especially in the prison environment, because you can have a plan, you can have things that are meant to happen. And, you know, I would, in my previous job, I was recruiting, supervising, managing and training prisoners to be peer mentors to other prisoners who were going through addiction. And there, we did some autism awareness training with the peers in the prison as well, to try and get them to be able to understand how to support someone who was autistic much better. And they did actually take on board a lot of the training really well. Did see some really positive changes with one person in particular. But the challenges that would generally come up were things like, you know, you might plan to do something at a certain time and then there'd be a lockdown and no one was allowed out of their cells. So that couldn't happen. Or you might arrange to go to do a meeting in a particular room, and then that room is being used by someone else, or another organisation. And so you'd have to find somewhere else to go. You might find that there's lots of noises, I guess lack of understanding perhaps from other prisoners as well. But the challenges were, there were quite a lot of them, but we managed to adapt the best we could in that environment. Obviously, it's very difficult with sensory issues to be able to do much about sensory issues in prison. There's not many changes you can make, and ways to adapt, and a lot of it had to be done more around communication or positioning of seating. And I know we've had some discussions before about group work and how to get around that, and what a difference it can make, even what position in the room that person is sitting, or who they're facing, and whether they're in a semicircle or whether it's a straight line, and distractions on the walls, and how to start asking questions, and how to even know that they're being spoken to in the first place. So there was lots of different things that had come up, and I know I found our discussions in the past really helpful in adapting to that as well.
Yeah, no, I can remember. There's a lot of things going on there. I mean, I went to a meeting only the other week, actually, 3 or 4 weeks ago, I think, and we were sat in a circle like you described a minute ago, and I was all right with it, but I was just thinking at the time, like, how many autistic people would just not be able to do that. Just the whole staring across from people and all that sort of things, knowing where to look. And then even things like if someone's talking next to you, everyone's looking at them, but then you feel like they're looking at you as well, which they kind of are because you're in their eye line. And so numerous times someone sat next to me talking, and I don't know where to look then. So I tend to look down, but then that looks it doesn't look positive. So then I'll look up, but I'll just keep looking around at different people. And I just find it really, really weird, to be honest with you. So like you say, the layout of the room is very, or can be very important. It can completely change the experience. And I know we've spoken before, probably background noises and lights and all that sort of stuff, as well. So just in terms of yourself, I mean, obviously you're still looking into the ADHD side of it. Is there any so sort of looking back, is there any experiences, good or bad, that you think sort of fits in there? Like your childhood or whatever. Is there anything that makes you think, oh, that could have been because of ADHD, or did you sort of have what you call more of a normal, past that? I don't know, really. I don't know if that question makes sense.
Yeah, I think so. I guess for me, it's more the impulsivity, I suppose, has been something that has come through that has made me think a lot more recently. So things like when I did really well at school with exams and with schoolwork, but it tended to be very much a last minute thing, getting stuff done. But I left school much earlier than I probably should have done. Decided pretty much on a whim, I think, to go into hairdressing. Did that for a while. But then after doing an apprenticeship for a while, then decided it wasn't for me, and then went to college, studied nursery nursing, came out of that with a nanny for a little while, and then once again just rapidly decided that wasn't for me, and took off and went traveling and lived on a kibbutz for 7 months in Israel. And and then we just decide, oh, I'm going to go to Greece. Went and booked a flight, and that was before really the internet was accessible that easily, and just went into a travel agent, ended up on a flight to Cyprus instead of Greece, close enough, but would keep making decisions and just kind of go, okay, I'm off now. and then I'd suddenly be traveling somewhere new, hadn't planned there, just turn up and wait to find accommodation when I got there and a job when I got there, and then kept on the move for a bit, and think came home for a while to the UK, lasted about 7 months doing a temp job, and then decided I wanted to take off again, and and ended up, I think I was going to go and do a ski season over in Austria. Again, no plans at all, just had a flight booked. Yeah. And the day before I went, I'd applied not that long ago before then to be a holiday rep, and I'd got an interview. So as I was going to buy the stuff to go to Austria, I had a phone call and then made the decision to go to the interview instead. Ended up being a holiday rep for barely, not even quite a full season. Then, so yeah, it ended up ongoing, and then I was working in London for a couple of years, and then took off after then and lived in Australia. Moved off to Australia, and that was where I ended up living for 12 years. But once I had kids, I guess the constant moving around, my ex-husband was a mining engineer, and we did have to move a fair bit. So in some ways that kind of fed my need for change. And there's a lot of things when I look back and I think, wow, there's there's been some really impulsive, sudden decisions, and maybe I haven't stayed in things for as long as I could do, and that's been a lot more stable over the last few years, and there's been much of a clearer path over the last few years. But I think because I found something I'm really passionate and interested in now, and the autism experience with Henry, I shied away from for quite a long time, because it was taking up what seemed like my entire life. That when I went back to work, I tried to move away from autism for a while, because it seemed like I was just living and breathing it, and that was all of my focus and energy. And now I've realized actually that's what I'm passionate about ultimately, and that's what I got a lot of knowledge about and experience with, and it's great to be able to now channel that into lots of other situations and environments.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting to hear. I mean, it does sound, I'm not saying like everyone with ADHD would do that or wouldn't, but yeah, it does. I can see the links there, which is interesting as well, because obviously with Henry, with the whole change, a lot of people who are autistic obviously don't like change, whereas with ADHD it can be the exact opposite. So that's interesting. So obviously, you were moving around all the time. Then obviously when you had Henry, it stabilized. Obviously, so it had to, didn't it? Really. So where, I don't know if I've ever asked this actually. So whereabouts where did you actually grow up originally? So obviously you moved around that many places. So where you live now, is that anywhere near where you actually grew up?
No, I actually grew up in Essex, in a little village called Ramsden Heath, and spent the first 20 years of my life there. Yeah. And it's only about an hour away from where I am now, but now I'm living in Surrey. When we moved back from Australia, Surrey seemed more of a logical choice, because at the time needed to be reasonably close to Heathrow Airport as well. For my ex-husband's work, he needed to be able to travel a lot. And then we settled here really well, and found schools were good for the kids. We found that we liked where we were, but it was also close, because a lot of family are scattered all over the UK in different directions, and we're fairly central where we are, so it's quite easy to get to everyone. And my mum and dad, an hour between, well, my dad's about an hour away, my mum's about 2 hours drive away. and
Yeah.
my sister's in another direction. Everyone seems to be roughly around an hour-ish away from me, so none of it's too far.
Yeah, yeah. No, makes a lot of sense. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot. I know there's a lot we've talked about there. I mean, we could talk a lot more about the prison side of it, or the ADHD side. I mean, what I suppose the other thing I'd ask is in terms of ADHD, what makes you sort of think you have ADHD other than what you've already described, I guess, like the impulses and just doing things on a whim, and is anything else that fits into that thinking?
I guess I do find that a lot of things I work really well under pressure.
Yeah.
I find that deadlines are great for me. I really struggle to function without a deadline. Anything that's open-ended is unlikely to ever get done.
Yeah.
So I need to have a bit of a tight rein on me when it comes to getting things done. If I know I have to get something done, it will get done. But probably not until the last minute. and I tend to tackle a lot of different things at the same time. My memory can be shocking, but I have found that when I write things down, I'm better with paper and pen. If I'm having a meeting, or if I'm participating in training, then I find I need to write a lot of things down for it to actually stay in my head. Otherwise, it just seems to sort of come in and go out again. I am constantly on the move. I do find that exercise is essential for me to function. Most days I will be doing exercise of some form. Find it really hard to do meditation and actually sit still for long enough for that and not have my mind wander. Although I have found, we've got a VR headset now, and I've found that there's a really good app that I use for that called Trip, and it's very much a visual meditation, which I find so much easier to stay focused. But yeah, actually trying to get my planning better for the days when I have a lot of things to do. I find that if I write them down for that day on a bit of paper, or whatever system I'm using, then to see it very clearly what I need to do is how I tend to get things done. If I don't write it down, it's harder to get things done, definitely.
Yeah. No, I mean, makes a lot of sense. I know we've spoke about some of those things in the past. Now we spoke about the whole diary system. I think we spoke about at one point. It's so simple in some ways, but so hard in others. Like whether you have paper diaries online or whatever, and sometimes having a mixture. But I totally understand the need, or the benefit, should I say, of writing it down. I do totally understand that, and I do that a lot myself. Less so now, just because I have too many pieces of paper then, and it just gets too much. But I think if you can stay on top of it, you can just have each day you've got your things you need to do, and you can tick them off. I think physically ticking them off does help as well, so it gives you that extra sort of energy and sense of achievement, etc. And obviously, I know we spoke about meditation before, which is something I'm still looking to get into. I think it's one of those that you could either be really, really good at it, or just the complete opposite. And yeah, it's a tricky one, that, because I know meditation is recommended for a lot of people with ADHD, and I think if you get over the hurdles you need to get over, then it can really benefit you. But yeah, I'll have to look at that one you mentioned. I can remember you saying it before, the app you use. So yeah. So is there anything else you sort of want to discuss, or you think might be useful to talk about? And yes, it could be anything really, whether it's to do with ADHD or your experiences with autism, or anything you're doing with your training, really.
I guess I know I picked up before when you mentioned about the fact that I guess the combination of, well, Henry does actually have an ADHD diagnosis as well as autism. But yeah, with my desire to want to be constantly doing things and doing different things, and love just doing things impulsively and just deciding to go out somewhere at short notice and doing different things. And Henry did always need a bit more preparation. But what I have found with him is that he loves to get out and about and do lots of different things as long as he knows what's happening for that day. So I know they use an app at the moment with him that is Hear Me Now, and it's very much got a visual timetable for him for the day that's quite easy to adapt. And every day that will be updated for him what he's going to be doing for that day, and they might only decide that day what's going to happen, but as long as Henry understands what's happening for that day, he's quite happy to do different things. He doesn't seem to need to have a set routine. Moving over to the UK or any of the moves we've done, we've found has gone really smoothly through the use of social stories as well. So just giving him preparation in advance. We used to use Pictello on his iPad, which was an app that we could put photos and we could record a voice to it as well to tell the story. And I think, first of all, when I gave it to him, he wasn't really paying attention. And then find him just flicking through it and listening to it in his own time. And we didn't have any hurdles with moving to the other side of the world with him, even though during the process we left the house, it was being packed up. We went and stayed somewhere temporarily in between there and coming over to here, but explaining what was going to happen in advance, and that was what was going to happen. He seemed to cope amazingly well, and even the flight from Australia to England, which you wouldn't imagine was going to be that easy to do with someone with as severe needs as Henry. It was actually absolutely fine. It was just lots of preparation, went in with a positive attitude and kept calm, which has always been such an important thing, staying calm, making sure that that your emotions aren't running away with you and that you're not getting stressed. Because if I'm not stressed, I find that he doesn't get stressed. And it was stopping off at Singapore on the way through at the transit hotel and going for a swim, which he loves the water. So I knew straight away that was going to be something that would keep him happy too. So, I think sometimes people can assume that if someone's autistic that they don't like to do anything different and that everything has to be in a very set way, in a set routine. And we've found with Henry that he is actually very adaptable. But it's just through preparation and having tools available to him, different forms of communication that he can use so that we're not relying on just his iPad. He uses Proloquo to go, has used it for years, the communication app on there, but he also uses pictures for communication. We've used different books, we've used lots of different formats, and as long as he has different ways that he's familiar with that he can access, then he can be quite happy and quite adaptable, really.
No, that's really good. Really good. I mean, like I say, the long flight, you would think in theory could be an absolute nightmare, but he's obviously done really well with that. And like you've said, as long as he knows what he's doing, it can be adaptable and do lots of different things and different experiences and still enjoy it, which is really good. That's really good to hear. And I think, it's everyone's different who's autistic ADHD, of course, and if you've got both as well, that adds a completely different dynamic to it as well, because you can both love and dislike, change at the same time with different things. So that's interesting as well. So that's going towards the end of the podcast. So is there anything you want to add as final thoughts, or yeah, is there anything you want to add really, I guess?
Only that I'm still in the process of doing more qualifications, more learning. Constantly seem to want to be adding more to my knowledge, but it is all based around positive psychology, and I guess more wanting everyone in general just to start being able to think a lot more positively about neurodiversity and recognizing strengths as well as seeing the challenges, because it's not just about understanding what challenges there are. It's there are so many strengths to so many of the different neurodiverse conditions, and for people to start being aware of that would be really amazing, I think, and could change a lot of people's lives. And that's it, really.
Yeah, no, definitely 100% agree with that, and definitely agree with the strengths and the positivity side of it. Obviously, we need to recognise the struggles and support, but it's not all that. It is also the good things that can come out of it as well. So yeah, it's been great having you on, and thanks for being on, and thanks for everyone for listening, and we'll see everyone next time. So thanks, Chrissy.
Thanks, Ben.